Hi, and welcome to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. Today, we are going to talk about false advertising. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. My name is Kale Houser. Thank you so much for joining me today. I very much appreciate it. All right, so today's going to be a little bit of story time mixed in with hopefully some lessons that you can apply to your business or to your just kind of your environment of what you've got going on, and especially how you're interacting with the public, if that is a business that you do. And presumably, if you're in business, this is what you do. We interact with each other, whether it be business to business or business to public at large or whatever that is, business even to government. We have these interactions. And as part of that, as you can guess by the title of this false advertising, we have put something out into the marketplace and we have advertised in some form or fashion. It doesn't have to necessarily be paid advertising, but advertised by reputation, by offerings, whatever that is for you. We have advertised and proclaimed that, hey, we are going to do this in exchange for this, right? We're going to provide service Y in exchange for even service Z or certain, money X, whatever that is, you've proclaimed something out to the marketplace. And recently, so the story aspect of this to get this started, it is summer now, right? We are now into June when I'm recording this, and which means kids are out of school. As I'm sure you're aware, if you're following my social media at all, I've got two young boys that are just about both teenagers. They're 14 and 12 right now, but Shay's almost 13 at this point, which is a journey of its own, which is exciting. I love it. But as part of it, we wanted to, get them involved for the summer so they're not just sitting around as, most parents are struggling to figure out what to do with their young kids for the summer when they're out of school, even though we homeschool and we have to deal with this all the time. But now they're not focusing so much on the actual academics of school and learning that aspect. So anyway, this past, spring it would be called, they got involved in the local community soccer league, which it was, very low key, not super competitive. Essentially, there was only, 4 teams in their league. So they just played each other twice and then did their championship series. But it was the boys' kind of first introduction really for a long, long time. They did youth, like little tyke flag football a long time ago, but it was their first foray back into kind of organized sports, especially for this age, being young men and things. And it went, as about as well as you could expect. It was not instructional at all. So the boys were actually pretty frustrated because it was advertised. This is actually a second unplanned part of the story. That league was advertised as, you're going to have like 4 practices leading up to, or no, it was going to alternate because they met twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. It was going to be Tuesdays were dedicated to practices and Thursdays were going to be games, right? With like 3 practices leading up to that. So we were like, sweet, they're going to actually get to go learn how to play soccer, learn the rules and the positions and, actual like dribbling skills and passing and things like that. Nothing super advanced, but definitely the basics, I would have thought. Well, that was not the case at all. Like half their coaches didn't show up because they rely on these young college girls from the local college team to volunteer coach, and they didn't show up till like halfway through the season. And when they did, they were sitting on the sidelines on their phone and stuff. It was pretty frustrating. And actually, I think I did a TikTok or something about it, but. Anyway, not very instructional, but the boys really enjoyed the game of soccer and doing it, and they actually did pretty well for their skill level. They put forth the effort. They were excited. They showed up, even when they got hit in the face and hit in the shoulder with the ball like really hard and it hurt. They kept going and getting out there. So I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. And so I asked them. I said, hey, what if we did this soccer camp? Because our community also has an elite team, right? An actual competitive team where you have to try out and you pay like some ungodly amount of money to be a part of. And it's a traveling team throughout Florida for their age group, that's an actual competition team. And they're nowhere near good enough to be on it because they're doing tryouts for it, starting for, this end of summer for their next season to start up. And I'm like, nowhere near that. But the the supervisor of the Parks and Rec of our community recommended, because her son is in this competitive league and really enjoys it. The instructor, the coach, and the teacher that runs it, like phenomenal. One of those European, like, grew up with a soccer ball under his foot kind of guys that has been doing this his entire life and played ultra competitively and all this kind of stuff. And he's created this league here in town, and so it came highly recommended. And she's like, hey. And I asked her, I said, hey, the boys really love soccer. Do you have any recommendations in the community where I can get them an actual instruction? Because I can't do it. Like, I don't know the first thing about soccer. I'm not a huge soccer guy whatsoever. I can pass the ball around with them and things like that, but I can't teach them like all the, trapping and stopping and turning and, doing the actual things they need to know. So she goes, yes, he does this summer camp for kids where it's very instructional and they, get to actually learn things and do that. I'm like, wow, that's awesome. So we go through this process of reaching out, and he wasn't quite, even though we were coming up on summer, he wasn't quite ready or had his ducks all in a row because he was wrapping up his competitive season. So obviously his focus was on that. But, so I'm trying to ping him like, hey, we're trying to make plans of what, just give me a general idea. Are you going to run like one session for the summer? Are you going to run multiple sessions? Like, what's going on? How much is it? And all this stuff. And I actually get him on the phone after kind of tracking him down a little bit. And we have a great conversation. He's like, yep, we're going to, it's going to be a full day camp, 9 to 3. We're going to spend the morning, running through drills and doing like mock games and things. Then in the afternoon, we actually want to focus on nutrition. So he's like, we're going to do like making these shakes, and then we're going to move it indoors, in the afternoon. Cause of course we're in South Florida and it starts to get hot here. It starts to get hot super early in the morning, but like really hot in the afternoon. So then they do indoor stuff and stuff. Oh, that sounds awesome. Perfect. He's like, yeah, it's going to be for residents of the county, $80. I'm like, wow, that's sweet. Absolutely. So sign up both the boys, $160 for a week. And we've been pretty excited about this. Like, we've been registered for quite a while, a couple weeks now coming up. And we actually signed them up for 2 sessions because they're running multiple, right, as most summer camps do, or they're running multiple through the summer. So we signed the boys up for this week, first week of June, and then take a week off. And then they were signing them up for the 3rd week of June. So, here it comes Monday morning. We're all kind of excited. The boys get up early. They have to get up early because they've been doing some traveling and stuff, so their time zone's a little off. And we, get their lunches packed, get their cooler packed, plenty of water, get their cleats, all this stuff. We get down there. And clearly says 9 a.m. at, this park that's not too far from us. It's kind of a softball field / soccer park combo. They're like, yep, meet at the soccer field, 9 a.m. Monday morning. Sweet. And you actually have to pay when you show up. So they didn't do any sort of advance pay anything. So I'm like, okay. So we take the boys down there, or I do. And we pull up at about 10 minutes early because I'm assuming first day everyone has to pay, that he's going to get there a little early to, handle the logistics of paying for camps and anyone that's doing last minute registrations and stuff. And no one, like literally no one is there. There's a couple grounds, the county grounds maintenance people that are doing some trimming around the around the softball field and like working on the sprinklers and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, that's kind of odd, but okay, maybe they're finishing up. Like no one there at this field. Like, okay, so I pull up the thing and I double check. I'm like, okay, yep, we're at this park, and yep, it's June 6th. Okay, yep, and 9 a.m. Yep, it's like we're all here, but nobody's here. And then pretty soon another parent shows up with their daughter, and then another parent shows up with them, and because it's just a small little park, right? And I'm like, this is really odd. Like, okay, maybe they're just running behind a little bit. Well, and there's really nowhere else around here. Like it's a big park in general, right? Because it's got basketball courts and horseshoe courts and things like that. But it's not very big in general, right? And playgrounds, of course. And so pretty soon we're just hanging out in the car waiting. This mom comes in because she sees some friends that and they're all like soccer parents type of people. But they start speaking, which I can only guess. I think it was Italian. I couldn't quite tell what language it was. And they're kind of, speaking back and forth to each other. I imagine like, oh, hellos, haven't seen you for a while. How's it going? Da 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 da. But then the one parent that had not walked from off, that was kind of with us in the parking lot, and we had our windows down, so we were just kind of and they were right in front of us on the sidewalk. she gets like really irritated, and she's like, oh, and I'm like, and she starts kind of pointing. I'm like, oh, I wonder if he set up in the community center, which is kind of the equivalent of a block and a half, almost 2 blocks away, just because the park of how it's laid out, it's very long. And then something comes out. Again, they're speaking what I think is Italian. The other gal is like, no, that's not the price. And she's like, what? And she gets on, the original gal that was waiting with us gets on the phone, and basically, I'm guessing she was calling her husband or something. She's like, don't sign him up. I'm like, this is really weird. Like, we're not registering for this. I'm like, what is going on? So I'm like, okay, boys, I'm pretty sure it's obvious that he's the coach, the one that running the program, is over at the community center. So we zip on over there. So here's where the false advertising kind of comes in. Well, one, false advertising of where to meet the first day. Not at the softball fields where you would advertise on all your flyers and things like that. And we got no email ahead of time, which you would kind of think for a summer camp, you'd send people just to help your show up rate and reminder rate, because people get busy and they forget when they make plans for the summer. So no email saying, oh, by the way, don't forget Monday morning is soccer camp, and bring these things. Don't forget to bring these items, right? Plenty of water for your kid, and we don't provide lunch, so make sure they have lunch, kind of stuff. None of that. So we show up, and lo and behold, yep, there's the coach, and I'd never met the guy, and his assistant, teenager, presumably somebody that was probably on his competitive team. So we show up, and he's got his little table set up and registration and stuff. Well, here's where the kicker comes in, and this is now where it's dawning on me why that one gal was so upset and yelling into her phone not to sign up. We, and every piece of literature, advertisement, because they did a little bit of Facebook advertising on their page, their little graphic that they had for their advertising for the camp, the Google sheet that we went in and registered with, everything said resident $80 for this camp. I'm like, sweet, that's actually really good. So for both the boys, $160 for a week, 9 to 3, and they get to learn from a legit soccer guy, and learn some actual skills. Well, he goes, and there was 2 parents ahead of me waiting to register, and one guy that was, basically just trying to find out information. He wasn't there, and anyway, long story, doesn't matter. No, it's $80 per day. Whoa. Well, that kind of changes things a little bit, right? We go from $80 for a week to $400 for a week, which in the scheme of things is not a horrible price for an all-day soccer camp, $400 per kid. And I'm not saying that it is, because we had looked at several other camps, different types of camps, and they ranged anywhere from $200 for the week on up to like $550 for the week, depending on what the camp was and how many hours and all that kind of stuff. The kicker became, every single parent there was under the impression that it was $80 for the week. Not a single person showed up and be like, oh yeah, here's the $400 for the week, is no big deal. And I felt actually like really bad for the coach, because this is his business. This is what he does, is run these soccer camps and run these soccer leagues kind of stuff. Because he runs spring camps and things like that as well. And I felt really bad for him, because knowing what I saw while 4 of us were waiting over there, so they were already kind of irritated that we were waiting over at the wrong location, and we had no idea that we were waiting over at the wrong location. We just went where this advertisement told us to go, and they were super irritated already. But then they show up with like one guy who was just the grandparent dropping off the granddaughter. He's like, I just have this check for $80. And he's like, yeah, that's just for today. And he's like, oh, okay, I guess I'll come back with a check for the rest of it. My wife just sent me here to hand you this check and drop off our granddaughter that's visiting from out of town. I felt really bad for the coach, because in his mind, it was a non-issue. In his mind, it was like, yeah, it's always been $400, $80 a day. It's no big deal. This is the camp. This is normal price. But in somewhere in his process of setting this up, he had missed that like $80 and then that /week or /day, right? And just put $80. And in his mind, it was a perfectly natural assumption, and all his advertising said this. But there was absolutely, because I went back and looked, I'm like, did I totally miss it? Like, what's going on here? And there was nothing. It just said $80. So the presumption is when you're saying, hey, this camp is, Monday through Friday for this week from 9 to 3, $80. That's the presumption. Like, you've made this offering and you've advertised this price with no qualifiers or asterisks or anything or small print. So that's what everyone shows up with the expectation of. And there's a couple things that play into this. One, just me feeling bad for the guy because I know he lost business. And unfortunately, he lost our business, not because of the price. I mean, a little bit because of the price. We hadn't budgeted for that. We hadn't planned for that. But anytime, well, before I get to kind of the fallout of this, there were things leading up to this as well. One was just the lack of communication, right? So it was kind of weird not having an email. So he kind of showed up like, I think I know what to bring you guys. Here's your cleats and stuff like that. So he was also making a lot of assumptions that, people knew that there weren't going to be total intro beginners that showed up in flip-flops, right? So those are things you kind of have to, as a business owner, you have to cover your bases, especially when you're dealing with the public at large, where it could come from all different kinds of backgrounds and experiences and things of that nature. You can't just assume everyone's going to show up with cleats and shin guards to a soccer camp because that's not necessarily true. Some will show up with, flip-flops thinking that they're just going to hang out playing Nerf ball or something, right? You have to cover those bases and just set people up for success. But throughout this kind of process and me asking, and I was also trying to ask about their future league of, just kind of how that worked and getting more information on it. Because I could see the boys being interested in something like that. And it was really hard to get information out of him with the communication, whether it be on Messenger or texting or anything. It would take days, if not a week or more, just to get a response back to kind of what I would consider a simple question, right? But there's a couple things that happen when you have this sense of false advertising, this perceived sense that that you have advertised something as a business and your public has this perception of that is not the case, right? And we've all kind of probably run into this in one form or fashion. But there's this automatic lack of trust, okay? So I have trusted you to do what you have told me you're going to do. I've trusted you to do this soccer camp at $80 for the week per child. And when I find out suddenly and at the moment that that's not the case, it just kind of erodes that trust immediately. And when we as humans have that trust scenario taken from us, our natural response is not to provide more trust, to not do second chances. Our natural response is to dig in, to put up our defenses and going, whoa, wait a minute, people that are more mature will do a little bit of self-analysis. Like I'm not saying that I'm super mature, but more experienced and older will do a little self-analysis. All right, like, where did I screw up? Did I miss something? Like, where was the miscommunication and am I responsible for it? And then when they figure out, no, everything on your advertising said this and this was the presumption, they feel, at worst case, they can feel tricked and they can feel actually lied to, which will, when there are other options, will destroy the relationship with you as your business, right? If there's another t-shirt company in town that they can go to that will give them an accurate price quote when they show up, they're going to go do that because it's just not worth the feeling of, can I really trust you to do what you say or advertise or honor the quote that you gave me? Because it does make people weary of future transactions with you, especially if you're in a type of business that does constant transactions, say like a printing company or a t-shirt company, that type of thing where you're constantly dealing with new customers and repeat customers. And when they have that bad experience where they feel tricked a little bit at the beginning, they're super weary of future transactions, right? And that's something that you have to overcome. But the important second aspect of this that I want to touch on real briefly as I turn this into a really much longer podcast than I anticipated is this gentleman, this soccer coach, technical expert, like, certainly not playing the MLS through Europe or South America or anything like that, but has the skills, and I think just by virtue of him being older, he has created this thing. He absolutely has the soccer technical expertise in order to impart his knowledge and teach the next generation. Has the passion, right? Like he lives and breathes the soccer lifestyle. Okay, he's dedicated his life at this point into these competitive leagues and bringing up these younger players so that they can go and have a career and do their future. And even that short interaction I had with him and seeing him, you could tell he was like very excited about what he got to do as his job, which was really, really cool. And you want that. However, the disconnect is that does not make you a good business person. And if you're in this situation where you're like, oh man, I'm so good at this, I want to start my own business, don't make the assumption that just because you're good at whatever your technical skill is, you're good at business, because they are not one and the same thing. Find a partner that is good. Partner with somebody that understands advertising and marketing and, finances and hiring people and payroll, all those types of things that you just may not have experience with. And this kind of showed a little bit with him, certainly with the advertising and the communication level, but also just kind of how he ran the registration process and all that kind of stuff. So I thought it was an interesting kind of reminder that technical experts, if you've listened to that podcast, do not necessarily make the greatest businessmen without purposely focusing on that aspect of it, like developing those skills. Like, perfect, you're awesome, phenomenal soccer player. You would smoke pretty much anyone that came up next to you and get around them and things like that. But when it comes to business and running your business, the business of soccer camps, the business of this competitive league, there are definitely improvements that can be made. And that's really what we here at Kale Houser Leadership are here for, is to help you identify those gaps, maybe to help point you in the direction if there's certain pieces that you're missing that you can gain, whether by somebody else or just you yourself gaining that knowledge. So definitely be sure to check us out. There is a new website live. Hey, it's been a long time coming. It's still getting some final updates, but it is live, kalehouser.com. Hey, look at that. Should be easy to remember. It's just kalehouser.com. You can absolutely still go to kalehouserleadership.com to get your free gift. Make sure you get that, because that'll be super helpful just in your day-to-day interactions with your teams. But make sure to check out kalehouser.com. Let me know what you think. I think it looks pretty good. I like it a lot. If there's something that is broken on there, or you don't like the flow of it, or it just looks kind of weird, please leave me a comment. Shoot me an email, kale@kalehouserleadership.com. That would be awesome to get that feedback. I'm absolutely open to critiques and constructive criticism, or even just mean criticism too. I take it as well. No big deal. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that little story and that journey through our soccer camp. Now I got to figure out what to do with my kiddos for the rest of the week as we decide, how much money to invest in their entertainment and betterment for the summer. Always a challenge, right? Of how to spend your resources. All right. Have a fantastic afternoon, no matter where you're at in the world. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.